Right, so Supergirl has a trailer. The longest time, or since it was announced. I still want to call this movie Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. I don't understand the name change. All that kind of signifies to me is that this, what was initially pitched as a faithful adaptation of the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow miniseries, by Tom King, all the dropping the Woman of Tomorrow bit just makes me think, oh, this is just going to be a Supergirl film, which is going to borrow elements from that miniseries, but isn't going to be a full-on adaptation of it. And this is the thing that kind of, and from watching this trailer, it doesn't look like that at all. It looks like this is actually trying to be at least somewhat faithful to that miniseries and to the source material and to what is essentially the Supergirl story. And something that I really appreciated is even at the end of this trailer, there was a like 10-second flash of, or like the end screen of the trailer was, find out where it all began. Go read Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, available at most bookstores. And I want Marvel to do that. Like, why has Marvel not been doing that? Is it because James Gunn genuinely cares about, not only getting butts in seats, but getting legs and people into comic book stores and be like, these movies have great source material and I'm actually going to take that and you should read that source material either before or after watching this film, to fall in love with these characters even more. And that's something that all comic book movies should be doing. But that's just my take anyway. So if I'm going to give DC props for that, that's something that they've been doing, even going back to the Green Lantern film in 2009. That film, not great, but it did at least say, if you like the Green Lantern, if you like this film, or if you're at least interested in finding out more about this character, go read Blackest Night, go read these other Green Lantern books, go read Green Lantern on comic book store shelves now. But yeah, I like that. As far as like, and I'm gonna sound like a total idiot now, because as far as being faithful to the comic that this movie is seemingly going to be based on, I can't speak for that because I still haven't read Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. However, what this does look like is an entertaining Supergirl movie, which plays off of the Superman film. There's things that allude to that movie and what Superman was like in that movie. And it sets up an interesting, new, fresh take on Supergirl, and it makes her feel different to Clark. Kara Zor-El should feel like a different character, and there should be a tonal difference between those two characters. And even knowing what I know about Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow and translating that to this does feel like what that comic is. And I will try and get to it before this movie comes out, so that I can actually gauge how faithful an adaptation this is. As far from what I can tell, as far as it is, this seems like a more faithful adaptation of a from comic to movie than anything I've seen before. I have not seen a single comic book movie outside of maybe Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I would argue that is possibly one of the more faithful adaptations of comic to movie that I've seen. You know, not adapting a character or adapting a villain, but adapting a story from book to screen, from panel to pixel, to to borrow from another comic book content creator. I like the look of this, and I think it. If anything, I have to commend. I do not know, or I cannot for the life of me remember who the director of this movie is going to be, or the director of this movie is. I do know that Tom King had some creative pull towards this film, and he was actually asked, and he was on set, which is something that should be done for any comic book film. If you're going to take from an actual comic book storyline, whoever wrote that storyline, if they are still alive, should have some kind of say, or should be involved in the creative process of making the film. I know that this video hasn't really been talking about the trailer in and of itself, because there's not really much to talk about. You know, Millie Alcock looks great as Supergirl. You don't see much of that in the trailer, which is a good thing. I've learned a lot from several years ago, 6-7 years ago, when Avengers Endgame came out. I've learned a lot since then, talking about like how much should be shown in a trailer, and this is just a teaser for a trailer. So, I mean, we're still a way out for the film coming out. It's coming out in June, I believe, which is the same month as, I think, Spider-Man Brand New Day, which I'm excited to see stuff on that as well. I hope that looks good like this, but it's a completely different conversation, because this film has been hyped up as something that is like this film has been hyped up as an attempt to... It was actively pitched as, we're going to take this storyline, we're going to take this comic book storyline, and we're going to make a live action film that is that comic book storyline. And the last film that I remember being that is not Logan, but The Wolverine was actually pitched as this is going to be an adaptation of Frank Miller's Wolverine. It ended up not being that. It ended up like maybe the first 15 minutes he fights a bear, which he does in the comic, but everything else in that, he fights a bear and he goes to Japan. That's the two things. The Silver Samurai being the main villain is not in the comic. Madam Hydra being in that movie is not in the comic. Madam Hydra or Madam Viper or whatever her name is, whatever she was meant to be, I think she was just Viper in that film. Her like shedding her skin like a snake would. That's not a thing in the comics. Maybe there is a character that does that. Maybe a certain member of the Serpent Society does that, but there is no, Madam Hydra, Madam Viper, whatever her name is, she doesn't do that. This looks more faithful than that, at least, because taking place off-world. You know, Supergirl is at that point in her, you know, she's actively going off-world to planets that don't have a yellow sun so that she can get drunk. And it is taking place on her birthday, which the comic does take place then. The villain is the same as the comic. The only things that I've noticed that are different is Lobo's going to be in this movie. And, well, Jason Momoa as Lobo is going to be in this movie. And as much as I love that casting, as much as, like, Lobo is in a thing, woo, great, cool, awesome. For something that is being, you know, pitched so heavily as, like, this is going to be, we're doing the comic as a film. Something that's being pitched so heavily as that, and that's like a big thing that James Gunn has said he wants to do with this film, or that, like, is the point of this film. I wish I paid more attention to the actual director's name. I will have that for when I do the actual trailer video. But that's the point of this film, something like that. And to then a couple of months before this teaser trailer comes out, to be like, first look at Jason Momoa as Lobo in Supergirl movie. And I think it was a couple of days after that it dropped the Woman of Tomorrow thing. There are worries there about that. But yeah, at the end of the day, as long as this film is fun, as long as it's got good action scenes and I care about the characters in it, it being a faithful adaptation, obviously it matters, because none of these comic book films ever really are faithful adaptations of anything. Civil War is the prime example. Civil War is not a faithful adaptation of the comic. It's a better film than I think the comic is. I think the comic is too big for its own good and has too much going on for its own good. The movie, I feel like, is perfect. It's not a war. It's a airport scuffle. And the Civil War part of it isn't as kind of like... But I feel like that movie is more successful. That story is a more successful movie than the comic is. And the comic, you know, revitalized, got a lot more readers coming in, and they were like, oh, this big thing, or Captain America and Iron Man are going to fight. Like, that was a really cool thing to happen in the comics at that time, from people that I've heard that were reading comics at that time. It got a lot of people to come back, and it got a lot of people, to come into reading Marvel that hadn't been for a while, or just hadn't been at all, just to like see this thing that was like a big moment. But overall, that book is deeply flawed. In my opinion, that book is just deeply flawed. But anyways, that's getting off topic. I think this Supergirl movie, from this teaser trailer, looks like a good time. It looks like a good time, and it looks like it might finally be a movie, a superhero movie, or a comic book movie that we can look at and we can say, outside of Watchmen, we can look at this and we can say that is a faithful adaptation of a comic book storyline to movie. And Watchmen is its own case because it's a one and done. It's a 8-issue miniseries that doesn't connect to anything, doesn't tie in with anything. It just is there. And also, live action. The animated movies, Dark Knight Returns, off the table. They are faithful adaptations of comic book storylines. However, this will be the first live action one. Obviously, discounting Watchmen, because I have to. And I don't even think any of the Hellboy movies are faithful adaptions of any source material. I think most of those movies are maybe. Is The Crooked Man a faithful adaptation? I've heard that movie's not great, and looking at trailers, that movie's not great. But is it faithful? Is the answer, is the question. And I think looking at just the rendition of what Hellboy looks like in that movie, I don't think so. But this might be the first properly faithful adaptation comic book to big screen, and I'm excited about that. The news of like Netflix owning Warner Brothers, and maybe this movie might not have an extended theatrical run. That's obviously sad news, and it's sad news for the stars of this film. That, you know, press tours and stuff aren't going to be as big, and like Hollywood opening night isn't going to be as big, because in less than a couple of weeks the movie will probably be up on Netflix and people will be watching it from home, and you know, the numbers of Superman weren't as high as they should have been. That movie should have made $1 billion. It was perfect. It was the perfect Superman movie. Struggled to make 500,000. Or 500 million, anyway. Struggled to make 500 million. Should have made $1 billion easy. You know. And then, you know, looking at Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four, those movies as well. Maybe not Thunderbolts, because there's a lot of homework that you have to do for that. But Fantastic Four was kind of primed and ready to be $1 billion. You know, it's Marvel's first family, and they did it right, and no one went to see it, unfortunately. Even though that movie is, in my opinion, perfect. This, I just hope, doesn't have all of those issues and all of those problems of just lack of public interest, and just the kind of thing of interest in these kind of movies just waning a little bit. I hope that next year is just people are more in that mood because of Avengers Doomsday, because of new Spider-Man. And, you know, hopefully this kind of like, hopefully it's one of those like the highest tide raises all ships kind of situation, where it can ride on the success of those two big Marvel tentpole releases, and it can kind of be like, it can kind of ride on the success of a hype for a new Avengers thing, and it can ride on the hype of a new Spider-Man thing, and then people will be like, oh, there's a DC movie coming out as well, that's a character that I don't know that much about. I'll go watch that as well. The only thing that I have that is worrying me a little bit is that I haven't seen, outside of the circles of, you know, comic book channels that I watch, just normal everyday Joe Schmoes, I haven't heard anyone talk about this. At least with Superman, I heard people talking about it. With this, I haven't heard anyone talking about it. And that's worrying for me. Like, at the end of the day, this is still Supergirl. It might not be Superman. It may not even be Batman. But this is still like a big DC character. People should be excited for this film. And I'm not seeing a lot of excitement, even though it looks good and it's doing all the things that I want from a comic book movie, which is at least attempting to be faithful and not being afraid of being a comic book film. And that's what I think this year, 2025, has been so great at. The comic book movies that have come out this year, excluding Captain America, but even then, it wasn't afraid to be a comic book movie. Just having, like, Red Hulk be in a film. As much as I have problems with that movie, I can't say that it was afraid to be a comic book film. You know, because Red Hulk was good in that movie. And the Red Hulk fight, as much as I would have liked it to have maybe gone on for longer, maybe been in a different film, I feel like that moment was a success in a film that is markedly flawed. But yeah, I hope that's a lesson that Hollywood in general can learn going forward, is don't be scared of making comic book movies feel like comic book movies and feel unashamedly comic book. But anyways, that was just my piece on the Supergirl teaser trailer. I thought it was good. I think the film looks good. I'm excited to see more, but I don't want to see too much more. I think these kind of trailers where they just kind of show off like a general vibe of what the film's going to be like, without showing too much of the film overall. I feel like those are the most successful trailers. Like that Project Hail Mary trailer that just basically showed the movie. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that, Hollywood. I know it's based on a book that a lot of people read. Some people haven't read that book. Some people don't know what the movie's going to be like. They don't want the twist of the movie to be in the trailer. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Hopefully you enjoyed. I'll see you guys then. Peace.